Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the brand new Tuya Knives Strength. As soon as I saw a picture of this knife on Mr. Dave Warren's Instagram, I knew I wanted to check it out. Mr. Dave Warren is our U.S. representative for Tuya Knives, and he now has a brick and mortar shop that I will link down below in the description. He's one of the nicest gentlemen you'll ever meet. So this is a premium knife with a premium price tag. We'll talk about that later. This one's a good size at 7.3 inches overall. It has a 3.14 inch drop point blade, kind of like a bayonet ground, because you got this swedge that goes all the way down to that tip. However, that swedge doesn't thin out that tip much. You have a pretty stocky, robust tip there, which is great for piercing and doing some twisting and turning if that's something you choose to do. I'm not saying to do it because it might void your warranty, but you could probably easily do that without having to worry about it. There are several different variations of this knife. My particular one's just the plain blasted frame, black hardware, thumb studs, and my particular version has the horizontal hand rub satin finish on it. I think it's an absolutely beautiful finish, and we'll see in just a minute if that finish will hold up to some use. I know a lot of people think that finish is so fragile, it's going to scratch up easy. We're going to find out. I don't think that's the case. I've tested a lot of knives with hand rub satins, and I've never had any issues. You do have a small row of jimping there, but that is for the front flipper. I mean, you can kind of feel it, but you could be back here. I'm always going to be overshooting that in the saber grip. Now this one has pretty darn thick blade stock at 0.15. For such a small knife, I think that's a little excessive. And then you have a pretty low saber grind here, so it's not going to be the thinnest behind the edge. They still managed to get it down to around 20 thousandths in the straight edge portion, but it thickens up rather quickly to that tip that's around 25 thousandths. I mean, you can actually see the thickness at that tip. Now we all know as long as this edge is nice and sharp, it still should perform pretty darn good. And I want to see how this hand rub satin holds up to some use. So let's find out. This one came with an okay edge out of the box. Definitely not the best edge I've ever gotten to you, but not the worst. And the geometry is a little thick on this one. So as long as it's sharp, it's going to perform. It's doing well here. The only time you'd probably notice any serious drag besides it when it becomes dull is if you were doing double, triple wall cardboard, or like that dense cardboard that we cut later on in this testing. We'll see. I am choked up because I have gloves on. I'm choked up in that front portion right there, just so I'm closer to that edge so I don't get hung up anywhere. Now testing the ergos, and you'll see me kind of situate my hand a few different times. I did try to choke up in that forward area. For my hands, you know, any little thing drives my hands crazy because of my neuropathy. I'm still able to get a good bit of force in here. Whenever I started bearing down at the hardest, it was a little spot in the back butt into the knife started to aggravate me a little bit, but it wasn't terrible. Now this is where I kind of knew it didn't have the bite that I'm used to seeing from a factory edge from Tuya, but it had enough bite to still get this done. And that's another place where you'll kind of notice the geometry on a knife. If the edge bevel on a knife is very acute, like say 16 down to like 10 degrees, it's definitely going to slice a lot better because that's what's doing the cutting anyway. Your thickness behind the edge only comes into play usually, I mean depending, but it usually only comes into play when you have very dense objects that will collapse on the sidewalls of it. That's why I do the tubing and stuff like that, because if it's too thick, that tubing wraps around and grabs a hold of the sidewalls and creates a lot of drag. Now this is a higher tip. It sits above the center line, so using the belly to do drag cuts is going to be the easiest. I did notice a little bit of drag on the the last tubing, and this is where the only place I really saw any struggle was the dense cardboard. Now, it wasn't terrible, and I'm sure if it would have been sharper out of box, it would have been even easier, but I didn't have any issues at all. It just, you know, I always prefer a slicier knife. That's just what I go for. Okay, just as I expected, it performed good. It did not wow me at all. It held up well. The previous Tuya knives that I've tested, they have a lot thinner grinds, and some of them have thin hollows, which that would have been great on this one. But this one is more of like a heavier user, I guess, if you wanted to use it for that. Now let's take a look at the deployment in action. So this one has a trifecta. You have a thumb stud deployer, a front flipper, and you have this minimal back flipper right here. This jimping is pretty darn aggressive for me. Look at that. That's pretty sharp cut, and this one is probably the sharpest. It's not overly sharp. You know, the flipping action, fantastic. And this thing, when I first got it, it wasn't like super smooth on the closure. Now it's breaking in so nicely. And then the front flipper, I can do it. So you can see there, I can do the roll around if I want, but I'm not a front flipper fan. So whenever I'm using them, I usually want to use it to just do a slow roll around, and you can keep contact on that flipper tab the entire way. It works good for that. But for me, the thumb stud action, outstanding. They did a fantastic job of dialing that detent for all three actions, which is a very hard feat to do. You don't want to make it too strong to where you can't use the thumb studs. Then you don't want to make it too weak to where we go to flip it and it does a little floppy flip. So very nice job there to you. You have a ceramic detent ball and ceramic cage bearings, giving it a very glassy smooth action. If I want to reverse flick it, I can, but I got to make sure I'm not pushing on this lock bar. I got to make sure to be holding on to the clip. And something that you'll notice with this, if you're holding it like this and you're not holding by the clip, listen to this. You heard the ting? That's from the pocket clip just bouncing, I guess. Not bouncing, but love hearing that ting. So yeah, it makes the tang. I don't even know if I mentioned it earlier. If I didn't, I totally apologize. The blade steel on this one is Bowler M390. I really wish we would see Tuya go back to S90V like they did. Was it last year? They were using a lot of S90V. S90V is one of my favorite steels. M390's good, especially if it's heat treated properly. I forget. I think they heat treat their M390 to 60 to 61, maybe. Somewhere in that area. And Tuya usually does a good job with their heat treats, so it's a really good steel. I prefer S90, mainly for the aggressive edge S90V takes. So let's close it up. And the main reason why this one is priced where it's at is because this is a titanium integral, meaning this handle is milled out of one solid chunk of titanium. It's a costly process, and you waste a lot of titanium because it starts out as a big old block. They got to mill all the outside, then they have to mill the inside. And if you don't get it right, you could waste a lot of money trying to get it right. So I'm sure the research and development process also factors into the price on these. Because like I said, you do not want to mess up. Now the scales are a little blocky. No sharp areas really. Like this, I could feel that, but it's not terrible. The only spots whenever I was really starting to bear down testing the ergos is where this hump comes up right here. It's not sharp, but when you're really bearing down, it's pushing up against these two fingers, and it's okay. And then I was going to try to choke up whenever I was doing the cardboard. I think I did because I have gloves on, but when you don't have gloves on, this little point right here is uncomfortable. Then this point, you know, it's not designed for that. If they wouldn't have had to put the back flipper too, they could have kind of dished the scale out right here with that, and it would have been a great forward finger choil. Because back here, you're a little ways from that edge, not terrible. And if you wanted to, if you had gloves on, you could definitely choke up. Even without gloves, you could, but it's just when you start to really push down. Whenever I was doing the wood shaving, I couldn't do that. It was uncomfortable. The pull grip is nice and comfortable, and the reverse gas station knife fight grip is really comfortable because of the flat spot at the butt end of the knife. like I said, there's other variations. There's one other variation that has just a plain tie, and it's a vertical belt satin instead of the horizontal hand rub satin. And just as I expected, this blade escaped with absolutely no scratches on it. I don't see anything. I'm looking through the camera. I don't see anything. So what I'm trying to say is don't be scared to use your knife that has a hand rub satin. It's going to hold up. Just be smart. Don't be dumb. The scales on this one, you have this hump right here. Is it coming across right here? I don't really understand. It's like it goes lower here, drops down here. Maybe that's for your ergos. I don't know. Then you got chamfers going all the way around. You do have a lanyard hole for the lanyard people. It's not the biggest hole, which I'm kind of glad they didn't put a huge hole there. I'd love to not have that at all, especially on an integral. Somewhat of a decorative pivot, kind of looks like a car rim there. Torx T8 for your pivot screw, and of course you don't have any body screws because this is one solid chunk of titanium. The only other screw you have is for the pocket clip and your hardened stainless steel lock insert. Now this pocket clip on this version has one of the crystallized titanium clips. I don't love a super flashy knife, but sometimes just a pop of color, I think it's nice, so it's not totally monochromatic. And I love the ting that this clip makes. Goes in and out of the pocket easily as well. And I usually give the lock relief a slide on integrals because it's a lot harder to do, even though I have seen it done before on the inside. But they did a good job keeping that clip away from that lock relief. And it's not a deep carry, but it's fairly deep. All you have is that sticking out. You got something to hold on to when pulling it out of the pocket. And I was a little worried that I was going to feel this clip during my testing. Now, I could feel it was there, but it wasn't uncomfortable for my medium-sized hands. That's usually a recipe for disaster when they're this way. You usually want to see them in the center of the scales. That's usually the most comfortable. But I guess being that it's not a super high clip, and they knocked off that edge right there, so there's no sharp spots anywhere, it was comfortable. Now, being that you have this big old chunk of titanium and then a big old thick slab of M390, it is going to bring the weight up on this one and coming in at 4.4 ounces. Definitely don't think that's out of line for this one. It carried well. Your balance point is absolute perfection, so it's going to feel nimble in hand. The lockup on this one is about, I'd say 30, maybe 40% or so. And then access to the lock bar, even though it's flush with the show side, they got a deep enough chamfer on both sides of the tie right here that I can easily get my thumb in there, no problem whatsoever. It's nice and comfortable. It's not overly strong or anything. The lockup on this one, and that's one thing that I've noticed with pretty much every integral I've ever owned, being that you don't have any standoffs or back spacers to where that could loosen up and cause any kind of side-to-side flex or anything. It really, when I say you can't muscle or I can't muscle any movement in any direction whatsoever on this one, it's got a very, very tight lockup. Exactly what I want to see. Now for some quick size comparisons. It's in the middle of the Ontario Wrap 1 and 2, and it's smaller than Spyderco PM2, and it's just a hair longer than the Spyderco Power 3. And it's identical in length to the Tuya Shocker, and it's a little bit bigger than the Tuya Mutt. And lastly, it's just a hair shorter than the Benchmade Bug Out, and it's just a little bit bigger than the Civivi Elementum 2 button lock. Now, being that absolutely no knife's perfect, what are my nitpicks and complaints? I personally would have much rathered a nice hollow grind here, especially because of how sharp the grind height is. Look how short that grind height is toward that tip, and then this top swedge doesn't thin out the tip much. So if you're looking for a heavy user, like a hard use knife, then yeah, it makes sense, I guess. But like I said, back here, they still managed to get it down. I think it's perfectly acceptable in this portion. And as soon as I got done testing this one, I decided to go put my own edge on it because I like the knife a lot. The sharpening choil. You can see after the first sharpening, I already started coming in contact with that plunge grind. But what I like to do is, regardless if that's going to happen or not, I usually sharpen it. And then now I know how much material to remove if I decide to cut a bigger sharpening choil in there. You don't have to, but it's going to continue to get larger and larger. That's why, we call it a smile back there, is because you're hitting that thicker steel of this plunge grind right here, which they did a good job. They brought that plunge grind almost completely back here So if they would have opened this up just a little bit more, you could have just sharpened pretty much the entire length of the blade, which, you know, they've already started for me. So that's a very easy one to do. I have a diamond file that will fit perfectly in there, and it will open it up just enough to where I don't have to have it overly big, which, you know, it's definitely a balancing act. You don't want that too big to where you're getting hung up all the time. And then my next nitpick, I wish they would have left off this back flipper tab and then made this contour into this portion, the scales, rounded over so I could use that comfortably as a forward finger choil. Now, it might be comfortable to you because my hands are beat up, but for me, I couldn't do it and put a lot of pressure into it. It wasn't that comfortable for me. There's also no lefty love here. Sorry about that, lefties. If you're a jimping guy, you got that, but that's intended for the front flipper. The jimping is a little harsh. It's not terrible. I mean, I know some people love that. Definitely grabs a hold of the skin. The other day I was flipping this for a while, and it took a while before it was uncomfortable. I mean, I do love how they dialed this detent to perfection for all three actions. It makes the knuckle roll really easy, but I'll tell you what, if for some reason you slip off of that or you're holding the lock bar and you can't do it, it's gonna rip your skin. Had it happen to me once. Never again. They kept the blade sterile. They hit the Tuya logo right here. Then on the other side, you have the designer's maker's mark. But what are my final thoughts? Like I said, this one, being it's an integral, I knew it was going to have a premium price tag. This one comes in at $420 for this variation with the hand rub blade or the vertical satin blade. They had a crystallized titanium integral version. That one was $495. And then they have, I don't know if it's still available or not, but they have an all blacked out version, black DLC blade. That one's $440. So do I think it's overpriced? No, I don't. If you know anything about integrals, they cost a lot more to make. They did a great job with the action on this one. Perfectly tuned detent. I think it's a good looking knife. Personally, I would have liked it to be slicier, but I know a lot of people don't mind. And a lot of people that are paying this kind of money probably won't ever use it. And let's just be honest. You know, most people are like, no, I use everything. No, you don't. Some do, but majority don't. I used to be one of those guys a long time ago. But if none of the things I talked about were deal breakers, I can definitely recommend this knife. I think it's a good knife. It's a beautiful looking knife. The action on this thing is addictive, and that tang is addictive. So that's going to wrap up today's video. If you have any questions in particular, feel free to ask me down below. If you are interested in this, I will have it linked down in the description. If you use my links, it helps support the channel. If you don't want to, no sweat at all. All right, guys and girls, I hope every one of y'all is having a fantastic day today. And remember, keep those blades sharp, smile more. Peace.